Imagine receive a promise from God that seems impossible. How to react when everything around you says it won't happen. Abraham lived it, and your faith made it impossible. In a great blessing, in a distant time, in a barren and desolate land, a man named Abraham received a call that would change your life forever. He didn't know what to expect, but God's promise, the gospel to a path that would challenge everything he knew. God said, "Go from your land, your parentage and your father's house, to the land I will show you." From that moment, Abraham would have to trust something much bigger than himself. He didn't know where he was going, but faith in God would be the only compass that would guide him. The call of God, it wasn't just an invitation to travel to a new land, but a grand promise that the first view, it seemed completely impossible. God promised Abraham that he would be the father of a great nation. An incredible promise, but Abraham was already 75 years old. His wife, Sarah, was beyond the age of having children. How could one man so old and one woman barren generate one entire nation? For human eyes, it seemed like one distant dream. God, though, human limitations are not limited. His promise to Abraham was clear. "I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will magnify your name, and you will be a blessing." God didn't just promise him a land, but also a numerous, more than the stars in the sky and the sand in the sea. That was the kind of promise that defied logic. Now imagine Abraham's inner struggle. His promise was great, but the evidence around you said otherwise. His wife, Sarah, she was elderly and couldn't have children, and he himself was already at an advanced age. God's promise seemed more like an impossibility than a reality. However, Abraham did something extraordinary. He believed, he trusted God, even when human reason could not find a logical explanation for that. Abraham chose to trust God's words and not in the circumstances around you. This confidence of Abraham turned into an unshakable faith that led him to go ahead even when the path seemed uncertain. Abraham knew that God would not fail in his promises. Your faith was not in the circumstances, but in the nature of God, who is faithful and just. Welcome to the Disciples of the Bible channel. Here we search together, strengthen our faith in God's promises. If you also want to grow up spiritually and understand how to live by faith, just like Abraham, subscribe to the channel now and activate the bell to not miss none of our videos. Join us as we walk on the journey of faith and we learn to trust God even when everything around us says otherwise. Abraham obeyed God's call and left behind his homeland, Ur dos Chaldeus, leaving for an unknown destination. The decision to leave, it wasn't easy. He was leaving behind not just your city and your family, but a life built on years of work and stability. However, God's promise was clearer. He would lead you to a new land. In Ur of the Chaldeans, one of the most advanced cities of its time, Abraham had comfort and familiarity. All was known to him, friends. One house, one legacy. But God was asking him to abandon all this, and that required a deep faith. Not just the faith that God would fulfill his promises, but faith not unknown, the courage to move forward, not knowing what him. When leaving Ur, Abraham started one journey, not only physical, but spiritual. He was leaving his comfort zone to get on one path that would challenge your trust in God. 2. Abraham faced the scorching heat of the desert, arid lands, and the constant find out where the next water source would be. The desert, immense and relentless, was a metaphor for the spiritual journey that Abraham was experiencing. Every step he took the promise to, God seemed more distant, but he kept trusting. And the difficulties didn't stop there. Abraham and his family faced resource, hunger, and even the danger of enemies. In strange lands, every obstacle was an opportunity for Abraham. Remember God's words, in a moment when they were near the land of Canaan. Abraham and his lot faced an additional challenge. As their possessions had grown so much, the shepherds of Abraham and Lot began to fight for space and pasture for the herds. Abraham, in his wisdom and faith, resolved to avoid conflict and proposed a solution. He and Elohel would split up, and each would take a different path. Lot chose the fertile land of the Sodom Valley. Abraham got the less painful part, but God promised to give him. This episode was crucial for the growth of Abraham's faith. Even when it looked like he was losing everything, he trusted that God had something better reserved for him. God then appeared to Abraham again and reaffirmed the promise that his would be so numerous as the stars in the sky. This vision renewed Abraham's faith that even without seeing the totality of God's plan, continued to walk in confidence. Along the journey, God caused Abraham to find allies, as Melchizedek, the king of Salem, who brought a blessing to Abraham. Abraham was also a man of war, fighting powerful kings to rescue his lotus. In all these moments, Abraham saw that, despite its own limitations and difficulties, God was with him and protected him. Every challenge along Abraham's journey served as a test of faith, but it was also an opportunity for Abraham to experience the power of God. He learned that no matter how much the path looks difficult or uncertain, when God promises something, he called. Abraham's faith was not based on what he could see or understand, but in the confidence that God was faithful to his promises. Despite God's great promise to Abraham, time has passed, and Abraham still had no children. The promise that he would be the father of a great nation seemed more and more distant. The weight of waiting began to weigh down on him and his wife Sarah. Sarah, already elderly, couldn't conceive a child. To human eyes, it seemed impossible that God's plan would be fulfilled. Then Abraham, even with faith in God, began to wonder if there would be any other way to carry out the promise that God had made. Like many of us, he began to question time and the divine method. In a moment of despair and impatience, Sarah suggested a logical solution. She herself asked Abraham to have a son with your servant Hagar. This was an attempt to help God to fulfill his promise. Abraham, giving in to pressure, had a son with Hagar, and Ishmael was born. However, God had not forgotten his promise. Although Abraham and Sarah tried to lead a way alternative, God continued to have a perfect plan. God appeared again to Abraham, reaffirming that the promised son would come from Sarah and not Hagar. God clearly spoke to Abraham that, even with Sarah's advanced age, she would give birth to a son. For many, it seemed like, but for Abraham, God's promise had no limitations. He didn't understand how this would be possible, but chose to trust the word of God. True faith does not depend on human understanding. Sarah, initially incredulous, and even laughing at the idea of having a child in his old age, also came to understand that God could do what seemed impossible. When the angel of the Lord appeared to her and reaffirmed the promise, she laughed. The angel answered, "Because you think of something impossible for you." Because this episode teaches that though we may be tempted to take charge of the situation and try to help God, He always kept his promises in your time and your way. The process of waiting and trusting is a fundamental part of the Christian faith. When God makes a promise, we can be sure that it will be fulfilled. Even when we do not immediately see the answer after the son's promise, Abraham and Sarah waited for companions, for the fulfillment of God's words. With everything, while the promise seemed distant, God didn't leave them without a sign, concrete of your curiosity. In 17, God appeared again to Abraham and made a covenant with him, sealing an eternal commitment. God told Abraham that he would be the father of many nations and that his friendship would be established with him and with thereafter him. This pact was not just a promise of descent, but also a blessing. God said, "And I will be your God, and the God of your..." God's covenant with Abraham was a princess of blessing and protection, a promise that God would be with him and his forever. God also asked Abraham to be circumcised. As a sign of this friendship, circumcision was not just a physical rite, but a reminder, constant, that Abraham and his descendants were separated and committed to God. Obedience to this pact sealed Abraham's commitment to God and, at the same time, made Abraham a model of faith and obedience to all peoples. This pact with Abraham has profound meaning for all Christians. He is not just a historical character, but points to God's promise to be with your people, regardless of difficulties. Just like Abraham, we too are called to live by faith, trusting that God fulfills his promises, even when we do not immediately see the result. After all that Abraham had lived, God again approached him. In 18, 3 men, which Abraham later realized to be divine messengers, appeared in his tent while he was resting at the door of your house. Abraham, seeing the 3 men, to them and with great hospitality, invited them to sit down, offer food and rest. These 3 men, actually, were sent by God to confirm the promise that Sarah, despite your advanced age, would have a child. During the meal, one of the men, who was the Lord himself, reaffirmed that Sarah would have a child within a year. This was one moment of great sadness for Abraham and Sarah, who had been waiting for so many years. Sarah, hearing this from inside the tent, laughed in disbelief, as if it were impossible for her, one woman of advanced age, conceive one child. But you, who knows the heart and thoughts, replied to Abraham, because Sarah knew there is something impossible for you. This deep question resonated in the lives of Abraham and Sarah, for it showed that what seems impossible to us, human beings, it's totally possible for God. God, in his infinite wisdom, not only keep your promises, but it does so in ways that go beyond understanding. Human Abraham and Sarah, now at a deeper level of confidence, came to understand that though the way and time of God were different from theirs, he does not fail to fulfill his promises. Their faith has been tested, but the visit of the 3 men was a reaffirmation that the promise of a son would still be fulfilled. It was then that Sarah, still in doubt, conceived and at the age of 90 gave birth to Isaac, the son of promise. That moment was a milestone in Abraham's journey of faith, because he finally saw the fulfillment of God. Isaac's promise was the beginning of the great nation that God had promised Abraham. Abraham's greatest test of faith came when God asked him to sacrifice the son of promise, Isaac. In 22, God told Abraham, "Take your child, your only child who you love, Isaac, and go to the land of death," and offers the there entitled. This was without a doubt the hardest time in Abraham's life. God had promised that Isaac would be the son, through which Abraham would have great. But now, God asked him to sacrifice. It was an apparent contradiction how God could fulfill his promises. If Isaac had died, Abraham didn't have all the answers, but he trusted God and knew that even without understanding, God had one perfect plan. Early in the morning, Abraham obeyed immediately. He got up, saved the wood for sacrifice, and departed with Isaac to Mount Moriah, the place where God had indicated. Along the way, Isaac asked Abraham, "Where was the lamb for the sacrifice?" Abraham, with confidence, replied, "God will provide the lamb for himself." When they reached the top of the hill, Abraham built an altar, put the wood on it, and tied it. Isaac, his only son, preparing to sacrifice when he raised the knife to complete the sacrifice, the angel of the Lord stopped him, saying, "Don't extend your hand over the boy. Don't even do anything to him, because now I know you fear God." At this time, God provided a lamb, a substitute for Isaac's sacrifice. Abraham, obedient to the end, had passed the hardest faith test of his life. He showed that he was willing to deliver all that God had given him. He fully trusted his wisdom and kindness. This episode is one of the most powerful examples of faith in the cell. He teaches us that true faith is not based on circumstances, but in the unshakable confidence that God knows what's best for us. When God asks for something from us, he never asks us for no reason, and he always has a bigger plan. Isaac's sacrifice not only showed Abraham's obedience, but also pointed to the redemption that God would bring in the future. The lamb provided by God forward the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, the Lamb of God who would give his life in our place. After the test of faith with Isaac, Abraham's life continued. But he knew that the future of his family was deeply connected to the promise made by God. In 23, Sarah passed away, and Abraham, now an older man, knew it was time to make sure God's promise continued through there. He bought one field of Ephron-Wittita, and Ali buried his wife Sarah in one location that would become one reference point for your family. Abraham knew that God's promise was still in progress. Your faith has been rewarded, not just with the birth of Isaac, but with the continuity of his lineage that God had promised that would become a great nation. Abraham, now a man of many years, began to worry about his son Isaac's future. He knew he needed to make sure Isaac got married and continued the lineage. He sent his servant Eliezer, your homeland, in search of a wife for Isaac. God led the servant to Rebekah, who would become Isaac's wife, and so the lineage of promise continued. Abraham's legacy wasn't just physical, but spiritual. He became the model of faith, the father of a great nation, not just by their physical descendants, but also for your trust, unshakable in God's promises. God's promise was fulfilled, and from Abraham, the children of Israel would come. The foreign nation, Abraham, who had already gone through so many challenges, became a benchmark for generations of believers, showing that true faith, it's not just about victorious moments, but also about trusting God, even when promises seem impossible. The end of Abraham's life, narrated in 25 shows he died in good old age and was buried next to his wife Sarah. The cycle of faith, obedience, and promise continued, and the story of Abraham has become a crucial point for the fulfillment of God's plans in human history. After Abraham's death, God's promise is not over. The blessing continued with his son Isaac, and even with life's challenges, God reaffirmed his promise to Isaac, "I am you, the God of your father Abraham, not afraid, because I am with you." And Isaac followed the same faith as his father. trusting in God, and saw the fulfillment of the promise of prosperity, even in hard times. Isaac had 2 children, Esau and Jacob, and it was Jacob who received the blessing of primogeniture. God changed Jacob's name to Israel, and he became the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. This lineage that began with Abraham extended to the children of Israel, giving rise to a nation that later would become God's chosen people. God's promise was fulfilled, and the divine plan ran its course. Now that we have seen how Abraham's faith and his descendants shaped the history of a great nation, we want to know what you think of this story of faith, obedience, and promises fulfilled. Leave your comment below how you have lived by faith in your own promises. We want to know your opinion. Don't forget to subscribe to the Disciples channel of the Bible and activate the bell so you don't miss any of our inspiring videos. Join us on our journey of faith, trusting in God, just like Abraham did.